Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the Metabolic podcast. I'm Dr. Suresh Khirwadkar, board certified lifestyle physician and specialist GP. I want to apologize for being absent. It's not really okay. It's not acceptable. I apologize. It was unplanned. It was unscripted, and it was longer than it should have been, of course, as well. I've been absent now from the podcast for about 2.5 months, roughly, at the time of recording this. And yes, I apologize. But I also want to explain why I was absent, what's been going on in my life, and what the plans are moving forwards for the podcast. So I had a complaint. This is difficult for me to talk about. No doctors want to admit that they get complaints, but we all get complaints. Now, most of the time, complaints are minor. They're a communication issue. Someone doesn't want to pay their bill. These kinds of things, they're fairly common. I don't get many complaints of those either, but these are relatively commonplace for doctors. I mean, I'm sure any professional. Most of them are pretty minor. They're dealt with very easily by myself or with the practice, and no problem. This complaint, however, went straight to the regulator. They didn't follow the appropriate usual channels, which would be to complain to myself first, the practice, etc. They went straight to the regulator, APRA. The complaint was ultimately not founded, and APRA found in my favor. They found that my standard was above the standard required of a doctor. They found that my record keeping was excellent. They found that my consultation on the balance of probabilities as best they can, basically, which is pretty much the best result you're going to get from the regulator, that on the balance of probabilities, the complaint was unfounded. The complaint was actually made, I'm not going to give the details of the complaint, but the complaint was actually made by a third party. It wasn't even by the patient who was in the consultation. It was by a third party who wasn't in the consultation. And so whilst I fundamentally support the rights of patients, certainly, to make a complaint about their doctor, A, they should follow the right channels and the processes, and B, I don't think it should be allowed for a third party to essentially make a complaint of the type that it was when they weren't even in the consultation in question. And this person was a third party. They were not in the consultation that they complained about. The patient themselves never made a complaint. It was a third party. And yet I had to basically suffer through that process for about 6 months. Thankfully, it's all done now. But the toll that this takes, the stress that this, kind of has put me under, whilst I fully support the rights of patients to make those complaints, I don't really support the rights of a third party who wasn't even in the consultation to make those complaints. The stress that this puts you under as a doctor is immense, because you are facing the very real possibility that the regulator decides, no, actually, there's no smoke without fire. If someone's made a complaint, there must have been a reason, and therefore we find in their favor, even despite whatever notes you may have made for that consultation. It's still your word against theirs at the end of the day. And I don't know if many doctors have that much faith in their regulators across the world, I'm sure, probably not just here. APRA, GMC, whoever it is in America, health boards and so on, they don't always have the best, track record when it comes to these things. And there's certainly been cases we know, of course, in the past of people persecuting doctors, regulators persecuting doctors for talking about things like low carb, keto, potentially carnivore diets and so on as well, doing anything outside of the norm, not just following blindly those guidelines, prescribing statins to everybody and so on. So basically this complaint featured, I'm not going to give again the details, but it wasn't about the podcast. It wasn't about the YouTube, the podcast, really anything like that, but it did cut extremely close to the heart of what I do on this podcast, what I like to do as a doctor in my consultations, which is deprescribing, stopping medications, not starting them in the first place, fixing people's health through diet and lifestyle changes. And I will never stop doing that. But it cut very close to that. And so I thought it was probably best to just go quiet, lay low, just in case there was any concerns from the regulator. I am the primary breadwinner in my household. I have 4 kids to look after, an expensive mortgage, etc. You guys know the story. I'm sure there's other people out there in the same situation. I couldn't afford to get struck off, get suspended, have sanctions put against me. This would have pretty much ruined my career. So I thought it best to just lay low for the time being. So that's what I did. As I said, thankfully, the regulator found in my favor. The complaint was dismissed. Ideally, it should never have got to where it was, and I shouldn't have had to suffer through 6 months of silence from the regulator, but at least they eventually found in my favor and no sanctions taken against me, et cetera, et cetera. My record remains clear, which I'm very proud of. That put me under a lot of stress though. And for the last 6 months, probably I've kind of been off the diet a little bit. I was doing like a 99% carnivore diet, but I must admit retrospectively, I've been reflecting a lot on what's been happening. I have gone off the diet a little bit, and certainly the last couple of months, 2.5, 3 months, I have been putting on weight. I have been not looking after myself. I haven't really been exercising. I haven't really been true to the diet, and I have been suffering because of that. No doubt it did make the stress probably worse. It's certainly not going to make me feel any better. So I kind of let myself go a little bit, which I'm a little bit ashamed of, which is also another reason why I hadn't been coming back onto the podcast, because I basically wasn't practicing what I was preaching. And so I felt disingenuous to come on and start talking about, what people should do when I wasn't doing it myself. So that also played a role. My kids have also been a bit unwell. I've been trying to get back into the podcast for the last month or so, but my kids have been a bit unwell here and there. And so the time that I have to do it is limited. That has been taken up with a few things going on recently. Just last weekend, in fact, we had Cyclone Alfred coming through here in Brisbane, which thankfully did not actually cause anywhere near the destruction and harm that it was projected to. Certainly myself personally got away without any real impact on myself, other than work has been postponed, cancelled, working from home, etc. But otherwise, we've been very, very lucky. Anyone that has suffered through Cyclone Alfred, my heart goes out to you. It was a very scary time here in Brisbane, something that we've never gone through as a cyclone. So it was quite scary for us and the kids. But it was really nice to see the community banding together, neighbours looking after each other, offering to do shopping for other people and so on. And so that was actually really nice. I think these things, my wife said earlier today, they tend to bring out the worst and the best in people. Mostly I saw the best of people, which was actually really nice to see. But that also put a bit of a damper on things last week, and this weekend I was trying to get back to it as well. But that kind of brings me to my next point, is these are kind of all excuses. And I'm aware of that. I'm aware that these are not really actually very good reasons. I mean, how much time does it really take to record an episode? I've been talking for about 10 minutes now. I could have easily done this over the last month or so, if I'm totally honest with you, and I'm honest with myself. But I think I may have ADHD. Now, this isn't some massive revelation, and this isn't really the focus of this episode, but I feel like I may have ADHD, and I've thought this for a long time. And I've done questionnaires before, but I've never really been honest with them. And so I've scored low, but I was actually really honest with it. I did one the other day, the ASRS, and I actually scored quite highly on it. And now I've never known a patient to score that highly who's not then turned out to get a diagnosis of ADHD and then end up on medications and ultimately feel better with those medications. Some people will be thinking, well, he's using this as an excuse to just, be lazy, whatever. Look, maybe it is an excuse, but I'm not trying to use it as an excuse. ADHD is very, very real. And whilst I do tell patients about carnivore diet, low carb, these things can certainly help, at least anecdotally. I've had many patients say that these have helped. They often do say that it's not enough. And then they go on to medications, they feel even better, less ADHD, as they say. And I've often thought that I have very similar ways of thinking to a lot of my patients that turn out to have ADHD. And truth be told, for a long time, I've felt like I think differently to other people. I've felt often like I'm just slightly out of phase with the world, is how people with ADHD describe it. And I think I would agree with that myself. I've often felt not content is perhaps the best way of putting it. Not depressed, but not content. And my wife will certainly attest to this. I am very changeable. And I'm sure people have noticed this on the podcast. I come out, I do 2 episodes a week, 3 episodes a week, 4 episodes a week. I'm pumping them out. And then just completely randomly, I'm back down to 1 episode or just having a break. I procrastinate a lot. I have trouble starting things, but I also start a lot of projects and don't finish them, which again is a feature of people with ADHD. I start projects very easily that are very challenging. But then once that challenge is gone, I get bored and just stop them without finishing them. I mean, I've got plastering and stuff I've been doing here. It was super interesting. I was super into it because it's great learning a new skill. Once I kind of felt like I'd learned the plastering, it was like, yeah, I'm bored with this now. I kind of just stopped doing it. And the walls are half plastered. I was putting in some bulkheads for, some cupboards that the builders kind of bodged a bit when they built the house. And that brings me to, what I'm obviously going through now is I'm wondering if I have ADHD. I'm going to go and see my personal doctor. I don't want to diagnose myself, talk to them about it, get a referral to a psychiatrist, see what they say. That's the route here in Australia. Ultimately with a view to seeing if medication could be potentially helpful to me. And whilst I always want people to try without medications, the carnivore diet was really good for me mentally. And I do wonder if this is why it was so good in terms of my mental clarity, because I've had lots of people say to me that they've just felt a lot less ADHD on the carnivore diet, but it's just not quite enough. And so I wonder if I have something a little bit more that potentially medications could be useful to me. So I'm going to explore that personally. I hope that I don't have ADHD, but if I do, I hope that medications may give me more insight, may give me that dopamine response, I suppose, that my brain is looking for, with a view to, I guess, in a way, being more stable. It's not really the best way of putting it, but more content, more stable, more happy to just do what I'm doing, less seeking new things all the time, trying new things and getting bored with them once the challenge is gone. And I'm hoping then professionally, I will be able to settle a little bit more on what I'm trying to do with what I'm trying to do. Basically, the podcast, everything will be a little bit more settled and stable, hopefully. So, but that, brings me to my next thing. What else have I been doing in the last few months? Well, I've actually been doing a side project to keep me entertained, which is a coding project, web coding. And I appreciate not a lot of this is about medicine and health, but I think it's important to tell people what's going on in my life. This is part of what I do on the show. I've been doing some web coding. People know I do this as a hobby. I've actually had a huge project. I've been basically building from scratch a teachable /Squarespace /Kajabi basically web app, which I'm hoping to launch in the next maybe 6 to 12 months. It's been a huge undertaking and it's been super fun, super difficult, super complex, super challenging. So I've really been throwing myself into it. Again, this potential ADHD brain of mine. And it's been really hard. I've built everything from the ground up, all the authentication system, the email system, the newsletter system, the authentication emails, like forgotten passwords, all of that kind of stuff, which is super complicated to build from scratch. But now I've kind of done all the really hard parts. Yeah, I'm kind of bored with it, which just makes no sense because I'm super interested. And then I'm just done with it. Like literally I've done the hard part. It was all finished. All the challenge is gone. And I haven't touched it in almost a month, which just makes no sense because if I can actually put this out, this is a potentially I could retire the moment this is out because the income revenue potential is just enormous. So why am I not doing it? Why am I not finishing it? I know I want to, but why am I not doing it? Because it's just the challenge is gone, which is kind of a lot of how I actually live my life, which makes me think maybe I do have ADHD. So anyway, that's my personal stuff, my own personal health. What am I at now? Well, you guys can probably see I've put on a little bit of weight. I'm not very happy with it. I am trying to get back onto the diet. I've actually been fasting now. It's day 2 of fasting. I've been fasting now for just over 36 hours. And I find it interesting that I've been trying to get back to the podcast now for about 4 to 6 weeks since this complaint and everything's all been resolved. But I've been finding excuses. I've been putting it off. I've been procrastinating, all of these things that I've said that I do. But isn't it interesting? 36 hours of fasting and I'm now back recording the podcast. Isn't that just interesting? Pure coincidence, of course. But what if fasting could be useful for ADHD, or at the very least, ADHD traits? I think at the very least I have that. We all probably have that to some extent. But wouldn't that be interesting if fasting could be useful for ADHD? It stands to reason. Theoretically, it could be, with just very low dopamine, not getting any dopamine in the diet, quietening, whatever the word is, the brain, making the brain more quiet. I just find that really interesting coincidence. My plan is to fast for about 7 to 14 days, possibly longer. I am filming it. I am documenting it to let you guys know what happens over the next, however long I fast for, 7 to 14 days, most likely. Why am I doing that? Well, I want to lose weight. I want to get healthy again. There's no doubt my insulin resistance has gone up. My testosterone's probably gone down. All of these things. I've not been really looking after myself over the last couple of weeks. I've been procrastinating, putting off exercise, etc. A couple of months, actually, not weeks. So that's where I'm at now. Moving forwards with the podcast, because you guys, of course, probably want to know what's happening with that. Well, of course, I'm back to recording the podcast now. My aim is to try and stick to 1 episode a week. Be fairly rigid with that, because I don't think it's fair to you guys to be chopping and changing all the time what I'm actually doing. I need time to devote to my other interests, like the coding, my website that I have been neglecting, the blog, my community I have been neglecting, and I am aware of that, and I apologize for that. Hopefully I've explained the reasons why I've been doing that, which is not acceptable, I know, but it hopefully helps to explain. There may be some extra episodes thrown in here and there, depending on how I'm going with filming schedule as well. My plan is to try and keep it a little bit varied. I think for my own kind of peace of mind and potential ADHD brain, try and keep it a little bit varied so that it also keeps me kind of guessing, keeps me interested in doing the podcast. And interested in the sense of just actually wanting to do it, the dopamine side. I want to do the podcast. It's super interesting to me, but it's just that dopamine side of just keeping me engaged with doing it. So there's going to be a variety of interviews, reviewing medical papers, my own thoughts and opinions, what's happening in my life, etc. Because I think that will be useful for my viewers, for you guys. I think it'll be useful for me, help to try and keep me on track as well. If I really get super ahead in terms of the filming and so on, then I may end up increasing those episode counts. But for now, we're going to focus on 1 episode a week. So this is really just to give you guys an update as to what's been happening in my life, by way of an apology as well, to explain hopefully why I've been absent, what's been going on there, apologize for that unexplained absence, and just explain what's going to be happening moving forward. As far as my side project is concerned, if anyone's interested, look, let me know, drop me an email. I can certainly talk a little bit more about that if you guys are interested. It's nowhere near even beta ready at the moment. It's not even alpha ready. So look, down the line, 3 to 6 months, I'll be having some alpha and beta trials and so on, giving people early access and so on, because I'm super excited about it. But yeah, just my potential ADHD brain, just, it's hard to get back into it once that challenge is gone. So I will get there. I will get there. Anyway, thank you guys for watching and listening to this episode. I'll see you in the next one.